everyone. Good morning. Hi, Candace.
Good morning.
Violet. We are so happy to have you here with us today. Candace and I are thrilled that you said yes and that you wanted to be with us. I'm Terry, and both Candace and I are based in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we're part of FemCity. Violet is the founder of FemCity, so we feel particularly honored to have her join us this morning. Basically, a little bit of background on me: marketing, sales, anything creative. I get my hands in it, and I can't stop. So that's that. And then Candace, real quick, tell us a little bit about
background on me. I'm an intuitive coach, which is just a fancy way of saying I help entrepreneurs, leaders recognize and understand their intuition and learn how to use it on purpose to make an impact for themselves, their clients, and their communities.
Mm-hmm. And then Violet, like we said, she is the founder of FemCity, and there are chapters across the globe. We have over 120 chapters between the United States, Canada, and it sounds like we're going into some other very cool places as well. I know we're in Aruba, correct? Or we've got Aruba, who are some of the other new ones we have?
So we have a partnership in Aruba with the Chamber of Commerce that we're working on. And then we are in conversations with launching in France. It would be FemCity Provence next summer, and then also FemCity Spain. And then we're talking about Switzerland and Portugal. Those are projects that we've had on the back burner because of 2020.
Right.
So I'm so excited to start having those conversations again. So I'm really excited to bring FemCity more in the world.
And feel free to call on me or Candace if you need any travel partners to go to any of those other places to help these amazing women get set up around the world.
Exactly. I know you guys will sacrifice yourself so that we could go to Provence, have some rosé. I know it sounds so amazing, and the women that are helping us over there, they've invited us to go. So I foresee us. Yes, maybe 2021 that we would have to do some sort of sort of activity there. How horrible.
And retreats.
For the good of the organization. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Another thing too, just multiple things about you, Violet. I know you've been a serial and social entrepreneur since the age of 22, which I find fascinating. You've just had this incredible life. I mean, you have a story. You know, you came from not like such an easy upbringing, and you've been able to overcome so many obstacles. And we're so curious about things like, you know, what is it that motivates you, and what has motivated you all these years to just push forward? And I look at where you are today, and I think about the impact that you're having on so many women. And man, it just brings tears to my eyes. I have met people through this organization that I consider to be like my deepest and dearest friends. And that was completely unexpected. I walked into a FemCity Lunch and Learn, and I have a very full life with really amazing friends that keep me fed. And I'm like, I'm not really looking to collect more friends. And some of the women that have just crossed my path, I can't imagine my life without today. And I consider you one of those people. And then I think it's like, Candace, you have to come. So Candace is all in now too. So I just think about the Maya Angelou quote where she's talking about how the stone you cast in the water has the ripple effect, and you'll never know how many people that you've impacted in all these other ways. You'll never see that. So what a beautiful piece of your legacy, you know, to have. Anyway, so I'm just talking now, but I would love for you to jump in and, you know, kind of tell us, start wherever you feel the most inclined to start.
Yeah, so it's been yesterday started like an emotional, you know, we're closing out the year, and I'm going to try not to get too weepy here, but I have to say, like, this year for me has meant so much over the course of 10 years of creating FemCity. This year specifically was really incredibly special for me because I saw our members go, you know, at the beginning it was like everyone was freaking out, and I saw them just like listen to my guidance, follow with what I was saying, pulling them up, right? Holding
Right.
that safe space for so many. And then they were holding the safe space for so many. So that ripple effect that you were saying is that it's not only me, but it's like you girls and then the girls around you. And so I am so incredibly proud of all of our members that, you know, I know it was horrible. I know it was horrific. It was scary. And I love how they just pulled themselves up, helped each other out, pivoted where they needed to, stepped into that uncomfortable space, stepped into fear. And really, as Jenna Rodriguez says, I know you guys probably know her too, like, get your brave on. And yesterday I got really emotional. It was our last virtual networking of the year, right? So it was like just seeing them transform and seeing them all helping each other out, and they're in each other's podcasts and they're writing about each other and they're collaborating. I think that to me was the biggest gift of 2020. Because I was scared too, you know, like at the beginning, I was like, oh my gosh, we have 120 events every month that are local. I mean, that is what we do. We gather in a physical, in real life space. What do we do? How do I serve? And so hearing you introduce me, you know, I think really what's motivated me all this time has been that connection that I feel I have in this world. But what is my purpose? So even at March, like where everything's kind of like freaking out, we had like 500 members cancel like overnight because they were just freaking out.
Wow.
So, you know, we went from like this huge growth pattern of launching all around the world and helping more and more women and creating like other programs and kind of just having all that, like just the panic setting in and just stopping and saying, okay, I'm not going to feed into that panic. What can I do within the powers that I have? Where can I be most of use? And I think when we stop and we recognize what we can do to better the world with what we've got, right? I don't have millions of dollars and I can't feed every single one, but what I do have is I have knowledge of business. You know, I know how to make money. I know how to scale. And so creating like the weekly mentorship, creating the weekly group coaching, creating the, you know, weekly virtual, the weekly live classes. You know, we went into that space and we were able to really be there offering the scholarship for women also, that when they couldn't afford the $10 a month, you know, being there for them. So I think that that's the one thing that I can share from everything. The legacy that I leave behind is that if we all take responsibility for one another and we have empathy and we reach out and say, you know what, I'm doing a little bit better than you. Let me pull you up. Let me see what I can give you. That's really how we can all impact the world in such a great way. That's really what I wish everyone would do, right? I wish everyone was a Candace and a Terry that says, you know what, I know my beauty and my greatness, and I can just smile to someone, or I can just reach out and say, hey, checking on you. How are you doing? You doing okay? Do you need, you know, let's hop over and get a tea through Zoom or whatever. So I think that to me has been the most magical experience of this year, is seeing all of you guys just come together. It's been
Right.
beautiful.
There's some amazing women, and this year is the reason Candace and I are doing this.
Yeah.
And part of it was, I talk to Candace a lot when I take my walks, and we were having a conversation one day back in July, and I said, I just feel so bad because I miss the networking. I miss the in-person events, and it looks like we will be in lockdown for a bit longer. And we had one of our conversations that just lit me up, and I said, God, I wish more people could hear what you just said to me, because that has helped me so much in this moment and in this day. And Candace is like, well, you help me all the time too. I'm like, really? She goes, oh yeah, you totally help me. And we're both avid podcast listeners. We love podcasting. So it's just like, maybe we should just do a conversation on Zoom, and then we can pull other people in and talk to them and share platform and share stories. And hopefully people will feel inspired, and they will feel seen and cared for in the ways that we see and care for one another, each other, in our friendship. And it's just been really fun. And as you guys both know, being in this side of the camera is not my thing. So I've had to be, I've gotten more and more uncomfortable and done all kinds of crazy things this year that I never thought I would do. And one of those things is doing exactly this. But what I do find is this is the time every single week where I look forward to it. I have a lot of fun. I enjoy my time with Candace, and we've had amazing, beautiful women come on and talk to us. And we're done. And it doesn't feel like any kind of work or any kind of real lift because I love it so much. So thank you, because even watching what's happening on the FemCity platform with all the online classes and the learning and the people that you were showcasing, that served as an inspiration, for us. Sorry, Oliver's a little wobbly.
I love him.
Oh, so adorable.
The rescue man. So yeah, thank you.
And
I'm really curious. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was going to say, I love that you guys do so much together.
Yeah. Publicly now, because we usually do stuff behind the scenes. We tag team and do things. But I'm really curious about how do you pull yourself up? Like, who's there for you in your moments? Because you hold this space for so many people. What are you doing to take care of your mental health and emotional health? And like, when you have the experience of 500 people unsubscribed in one day, like, what helped you come out of that? Like, when you're saying, I'm not going to go down into the well of despair, what helped you?
I think it's the self-care aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the spirituality part as well.
Mm-hmm. Because
I believe that, first of all, if I give myself the opportunity to find clarity and get grounded, and that I do through either my walks or I get on my Peloton or I was a Pilates instructor, so I still do Pilates every day. Those are my moments where I can just be myself. And that brings me a lot of joy. And then those moments of when things look like they're crashing, right? I was like, oh my God. And we had two competitors that went out this year.
Wow. And
so that was really scary for me to read about, because they had way more funding, way more resources, right? Pseudo celebrities. And so when you see your competitors that are big, the big dogs, go under, all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, this is not the way the story is going to end. It just is not. And so it's that prayer, that meditation, that connectivity to say, okay, what is my purpose during this moment? And redirecting my action steps in alignment with what's my why. Like, what at the end of the day does Violet want to do? I want to help women make money. I want to help women, live a life that's beautiful, whether they have a partner or 5 dogs or 10 cats or 20 kids, it doesn't matter, like all those things. But if I can help them, that's my purpose. So when things started kind of going like that, I go back to that why. If my purpose is to help women, then all this stuff doesn't matter. Right? All this stuff doesn't matter. Right. I can still help women. I can still do that. And so redirecting my attention to the service aspect, that talent that I think God gave me, I think that's where I get that pull. And so, and honestly, it has been heavy. Sometimes, we do these gatherings and sometimes we have femmes that break down. Right. And we all hold the space for them, right? We've had a couple of those where they're like, I'm sorry, it's just been a really bad day. And they share it with us, and we all, we do like this kind of thing or this, and we hold the space for them. That's really heavy. So like yesterday, I think I'm starting to release it. I started crying during our virtual networking. I think some of the femmes could realize it. Like I was, kind of like every once in a while, I was just like dabbing and like centering myself, like, Violet, don't be, think of others, you know what I mean? Stop being, selfish and like crying, like just break away and you can cry later. And so last night, as I was sitting outside in the courtyard with my husband, I was going through like how proud I am of all these femmes, how proud I am that they didn't give up on themselves, right? They're investing, they bought the courses, they bought, they invested in the copywriter, they're going to make their e-commerce finally and all those things. And like Terry stepping out in the fear, like behind the camera, in front of the camera. So, that yesterday I just started getting really overwhelmed because I've been holding it for not 12 months, but 10 months, 9 months. Wow. Holding it, and now like breathing for the first time and saying, wow, we collectively did it. All of us, like, to celebrate that we all did it. We're here. So that I think is how I get through those rocky moments.
Right on. I love that. That sounds very similar to Terry, with your process for like going for walks, getting clarity. It's like, that's very much also Terry. I play video games when I need to ground and like get centered, and it sounds weird, but that's like the only thing that can really ground me. And walking also and laying, like literally laying on the ground, is a thing that is really big for me. And it's been a little bit cold, but yesterday it was like, I've got to like lay outside on the ground and then take a hot bath. Uh,
Love
so I'm really also curious. I'm just curious about your mindset, which is a huge thing. Like a lot of entrepreneurs come in, or the business owners, and I'm finding the hardest thing as a business owner is the battle against yourself. Like the thing when you want to do something and it doesn't turn out the way you think it ought to look, and then there's the judgment and the reasons for why something didn't work out, which is, oh, it just, this thing isn't that big of a deal, versus something in your head that goes, it's because I'm a loser and I suck and I can't do it. Like that constant back and forth. I'm just really curious, how did you cultivate such a strong, like, you know what, I've got to come back to just service, and this is my purpose from God. It reminds me of the Blues Brothers, we're on a mission from God, and then they go out and do something impossible, So how did you cultivate that within yourself? Is it like, and especially with your past, and Terry alluded to it, it was very difficult. It wasn't like you were born with millions of dollars and had this easy life. It was like some real hardcore shit that went down with you. Like, what helped you overcome some of those challenges?
I think it was a combination of, so a couple of things that played into that. Being first generation Cuban, one thing I heard when I was little over and over again was all of my family and everyone I knew arriving to a new country with a new language, not knowing the culture, things don't translate well. I mean, they're completely two completely different cultures, when you're talking about Cuban and then American, and hearing the rise from poverty to wealth. So in the back of my mind, I knew the stories were possible because I heard it often. And so that was one thing that when I was 22 years old, and I was like, okay, I know I don't want to have kids and be have them be like at home by themselves, like I was raising themselves. So I knew that, but I go back to that story as a young girl, hearing it all the time, because you had immigrants that were coming and, they're setting up shop with their other siblings and they're all living in a garage on cots on the floor. So you hear the stories of grit. So those were kind of like the narratives I created in my mind. Like, well, if that person can come to this country with no money, a quarter in their pocket, not know the language, not have education, well, then the possibility is huge for all of us because they made it. Right now they own gas stations, or, they put themselves through school. I mean, my father was not a truck driver, but the big trucks that you put the new cars on, and they're all kind of like stacked.
Yeah.
So my father did that for a couple of years while he was going to college. So, you hear all these stories. And so that was really a good grounding for me. And I recognize that not everybody has that. So I was really blessed to hear that. And then the second thing is that since I was alone all the time as a young girl, and I had a mother who was mentally ill and then of course became a big drug addict, the stories weren't really self-limiting because I was raising myself. So I didn't have someone tell me, you can't do this, or, so I didn't have that growing up. And I know a lot of adults have that, where they have, oh, you can't do that. What are you talking about? You can't, you're Cuban, or you didn't go to that school, or who do you think you are? So I didn't have that. I didn't have that anything, but that's a blessing too.
That's good.
But I did have a lot of self-limiting thoughts. And so one around love, right? If your own mother doesn't love you the way that other mothers you see love, on TV and movies, even when you start school, you start going to people's homes and you're like, that mother's really nice. Like, that's different, like, oh, that mother's like making meals, like how interesting. Or, she's saying kind things, or like she's at home, my mother's over home. So you start recognizing that, but then you start having these beliefs that are like, well, if my own mother doesn't love me, then who would? Mm-hmm. Right. So just as an example, right. So I had a ton of self-limiting thoughts. Even with that, I had a ton of self-limiting thoughts because of all these different things that happened. And the truth is that it was an evolution, right? Because I kept going through the same pattern over and over and over again. I kept going, like everyone I dated was also a drug addict, right? Like my first real boyfriend in college, he was in rehab. Why is that? Well, because that's what I grew up with, that savior complex. So eventually after a while, you're like, this is not, it's like the circle, like what's the commonality here? Oh, it's me. I'm the commonality. I'm attracting this. Reading spiritual books also. Marianne Williamson is my first, Woman's Worth, A Return to Love. Oh my gosh, iconic books that Gary Zukov, Seed of the Soul. So I started doing my own spiritual journey at the age of like 18, 19, and reading and just immersing myself into that really helped. And then because I didn't have any fear about business, because I had heard all these immigrants from Cuba, you know, they created it. So I kind of went out into the world starting businesses with no fear. You know, hey, so what? You know, I'll do it, and you know, I'll figure it out, and you learn along the way. And so, but going back to the narratives, I had so many about love. I had, even when I started making a lot of money, who people aren't going to like me anymore, right? Like if I make a lot of money, I'm going to lose my friends. Maybe my husband will leave me because now I'm making a lot of money. And so you have all these ridiculous things. So for me, it was like, what's this pattern that keeps occurring in my life? Okay, I need to figure out, I'm in control, I'm responsible, I'm accountable. What's the pattern? Oh, the pattern is I always end up dating someone who's in a drug, you know, who's a druggie. Oh, you know what? I keep going, making so much money, and then I block myself. Why? Why can't I get to the, oh, because I think, you know, so it's always been this kind of evolution. Eventually you get through so many that you no longer have them. And as soon as you start having a little thought like, wow, I'm such a loser, right? Like a little thought, maybe you wake up, maybe you're going to have your period, maybe you're a little bit hormonal, maybe that day has been really bad. For whatever reason, sometimes we have that trigger happens and we're like, oh my gosh, I'm a loser. What am I? Now I understand, like, oh, Violet, that's not true. That's not real because of all these things. This is the fact. So you kind of go back to the receipts and you look and say, you know what, that's a narrative that no longer doesn't lift me up. It doesn't support my greater connection to my higher purpose. So it has been an evolution. It wasn't like, boom, like perfect. It took a good solid 20 years. So a long time. But now I've got, like, you know, the Teflon. Now nothing knocks me down.
It's so great.
Right.
And just the support system, you know, that we build around ourselves. At a
Yes.
certain point, those people around us start to change, because I have some
Absolutely.
similar things in my background, and I'm like, God, how am I going to get out of this? And I look around today and I go, oh my God, the people that are closest to me are so batshit cool. It just makes my heart sing, and I know I'm held.
Right.
But it takes work, you know?
Yeah.
And I think too, there's that gap, and you can look back and you go, oh, I don't want to go back there again.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
was not.
been there, done that. No, that's not good.
Actually, and you become really good at seeing, you know, I have a very, now, if someone sends me an email and I get my energies like, I am really good at, like, just doing a spiritual block. And I just, like, you know what, I don't mess with drama. I don't mess with anything. Like I am now such an expert in not being like that was, because I let everybody in. I'd let everyone in, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, you know, and help and now I realize, like, you know, you can't help everyone. They need to help themselves. You can give them the tools and the sources, but I cannot be anyone's savior. They have to save themselves. And that was like a 15-year lesson there.
And what a weight off your shoulders. Every now and again, run the skirt around the edges, and you're like, oh, that one almost slipped in, but they didn't get this far. Or you catch it quicker. You know, if someone's trying to hijack something around you that's not good, or, you know, your time or your heart or any of that. But being able to be strong in that no too, and cut it off. Yeah. I want to ask you too. I've got my fabulous book here. So you're a best-selling author, and I would love for you to talk about your book.
So funny, that book, I wrote it 3 times. Not that specifically, but the first one. So for many years, people were like, oh my gosh, Violet, because they knew about my story. You know, I have so many lessons, life lessons. And so how did you get out of, you know, how did you make it through with a mother as a drug addict? How did you make it through, you know, in a violent household? How did you make it through? So I was like, okay, so I wrote my first book, and the first book was all business, because then also femmes were like, you need to write a business book. There aren't enough business books. And I love your leadership. It's always with grace and blah, blah, blah. And so I wrote it, hated it. I was like, this is boring. I know who's going to read this. So then I wrote a second one. It was all like super gushy, you know, like, oh, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to write it for myself using my own spiritual words and the way that I speak. I'm just going to make it really small so you can put it in your pocketbook. And it's just going to cover 10 lessons, and that's it. And it's going to go through like the 10 hardest things. And eventually I thought about breaking each of the chapters down into like its own book. So they're kind of like little snippets. And then the questions that I asked myself, because I'm a huge believer that if we ask ourselves the right questions, our higher self will respond with what the information we need in order to move forward. That everyone has the ability to be really great. We're not destined to be mediocre, but you have to ask yourself the right questions and allow your higher self to respond. So it's filled with questions that I ask myself. It's filled with mantras that, you know, you can kind of create your own. I believe that we can read all the books, we can hire all the coaches, we can listen to the podcast, but at the end of the day,
Right.
we are our own gurus. It should not be, I should not be someone's guru.
Right.
You should be your own. Take all the
Right.
information and then formulate it what's best for you. And so that's where that concept, the self-guided guru, is, because it should be within yourself. You should not be praising or,
Right.
worshiping anyone other but yourself, and that connectivity to the divine.
Right. Love it. I love it. And it's beautiful. Thank you.
I love the cover. It makes me smile so much. My friend Kat
Beautiful.
made
Let's
it.
look at it really nice and close. You know what's
I love
interesting
it.
too? We had Tiffany Gravel on last week, and she was our original founding
Yes.
president for FemCity Albuquerque. And we talked about her new book. And similar to what you just said, she said, I wrote this for my family. And now what's happening is all these other people are feeling energetically drawn towards her book. And she's already sold over 500 copies in just a few weeks. And pretty amazing. But yeah, it's like, it's interesting when we get in that flow of just doing things for the right reasons, or for reasons that really help us. Sometimes it has a magic all its own, for all these other people. So
I haven't even told my dad. So it's been in my email signature. My father the other day was like, hey, I didn't know about this. I didn't want him to read it.
Oh.
And I had a cousin of
Wow.
mine who actually bought it, and she read it, my mother's first cousin, and she had the same upbringing. She said, I wish I had read your book. I wish I had had this, because my upbringing and yours are very similar, even though she's about 25 years older than I am. So it was, when she first bought the book, I was like, oh my gosh, because
Right.
I didn't want her
Right.
to know the truth about her own cousin, because they were close. So yeah, it's interesting. I hope no one in my family reads it. I mean, the ones that have read it already, they have found a connection to it. My father specifically, because he already feels so bad for, the situation had gotten so bad. And then, you feel bad, you feel guilty, but the reality is, like, we do the best you can. We all do the best we can with what we've got.
Always.
Yeah.
Always.
That's really helpful to hear, because there are things that I know will help people if I shared them, but there's still a part of me that feels guilty because my dad was emotionally and verbally abusive. And there's still something in me that's like, oh, I'm not supposed to put the family business out there, but at the same time, that's my story too, and how I overcame things could be really useful and helpful to folks. So I love that you just said that. You just clicked something, like I've just had a light bulb moment. And I also want to say, not only do you have your book out there, but I feel like that's how you built Fems, is when you're saying that people didn't come up with the grit that you had, and that kind of like the mental tenacity. It's mental grit as well, like the actual work that you put in, but like, nope, it's possible. It's possible. I think when I look at what you've done with Fems and the networking group that you created and the things that people have access to, it goes a lot into, you have a lot of things with mindset and just emotional resets, emotional healing, spiritual connection, in addition to business tools that when I was looking at different networking organizations, they don't really have that. It's kind of like the same old thing. So I'm not surprised that competitors went out of business and Fems stayed, because just the whole vibe, when you're coming from that heart-centered place of, I really care about women, I want them to succeed, whatever that means for them, I feel like that reverberates through the whole organization, and people get what they need as a part of the organization.
It does.
Yeah. And I think it's a good filter, because at the end of the day, I want our femmes to hang out with women that have that same vibration, right? And so Business for Your Soul being our slogan really made us stand out. And the truth is that we're not for everyone. I get it. I want to be for everyone. I want it to be for every single woman. But if you don't understand the interconnectedness that we have as sisters, regardless of religion, region, background, experience, education, color of skin, height, weight, age, if you don't understand that fundamentally, spiritually, we're all connected, this is not the place for you. And we lost, so we've done a couple of things, and we've lost some more members. So it's funny. We lost some members when we did the racial conversation. We had some not so nice emails. It's not for you. Listen, if you're uncomfortable because I'm talking to someone and asking her what it feels like to be a Black woman in 2020, if you're upset over the conversation,
goodbye.
It's not for you. Yeah, this is not for you. And so there was, I had always said that, but 2020, really made it come true in a
Mhm.
sense of like just, filtering out. And then we screened in partnership with Misrepresentation, one of my favorite documentaries.
Right.
We partnered up with the organization and we screened The Great American Lie. And then again, that film talks about inequalities.
Right.
And the solution is empathy. And so we had a lot of hate email that came through and a lot of women that canceled their membership. And again, I go back to, if you're not comfortable with the conversation of how do I leverage empathy
Right.
to be a solution to the world, how are you against that? I don't understand. And we had women that were Republicans and Democrats that were on our panel. And so it was always about the conversation of like, what do we take from that? We had women that were Christian. We had women that were non-Christian. So, it has been interesting that I've always said FemCity is not for everyone. And this year it was definitely, we stepped into that space and I was like, you know what, if it makes you feel uncomfortable enough to leave,
Mhm.
a lot of growth that needs to happen there.
Right.
It's not the place for you.
Right.
Wow.
And this year really has helped flush some things out.
Right.
Things,
Right.
we've seen people's things come up, and it's okay. It's all right. Like
Okay.
it's almost like that. If you have something that needs to heal, it has to, blow
Yeah.
up and maybe get ugly and become a sore before it can start to scab up, and we can really begin the healing process. So, so be it. So be
Yeah.
it.
And I always felt like FemCity, we've always focused, or we've tried to focus as much as we can on diversity. We can always do better. But I
Mhm.
always felt like FemCity, because we're not political, we're not religious, I always felt like it would be a great way for women to get to know other women that were not like them.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
that would open up and say, like, for instance, I have one of our closest friends. He was saying when he was in college, he was on a flight to like South Carolina or something to be with friends for spring break. And the woman that sat next to him, Candace, I think I told you the story. The woman that sat next to him, they started talking and he thought she was real cute. So he was like kind of starting to flirt with her. And he mentions he's Jewish. And she was like, well, wait a moment. You don't have horns on your head. And he kind of started laughing because he grew up in Miami, which has a very large Jewish population. He had never heard that before. He had never thought someone, this is also 30 years ago, had never thought someone would actually be serious about. And she was dead serious. She was like, wait a moment, there are no horns on your head. Like, what are you talking? You're Jewish and you're sitting next to me. And so
Wow.
as he laughs about it now, it's a really great illustration of how we view other humans. I've been, being Cuban, right? What are you? And we talked about that before too. So I always felt like FemCity would actually like bring people together and they'd become friends by accident, right? They'd be like, that's
Right.
someone I wouldn't ever have talked to, someone who's Jewish or someone who's Cuban or someone who's from India. Like I would have never talked, but now I have. And I realize the beauty in embracing people that are different. So I've always felt like FemCity could be that avenue. So we didn't really have to talk about the politics or the religion part and all that. We would just be a spiritual place because that's how we break the barriers that hold us apart from each other. Does that make sense? I'm bambling
Yeah,
now.
no, it
No,
absolutely it does. Go ahead, Candace, and
it
then
does
I'll
make
chime
sense.
in.
Yeah, but I think that, and this is kind of like the fallacy of just being a human being on earth at this time, is everything has become political,
Yeah.
And I think you have actually taken definitive steps to say, this is who FemCity is, or this
Right.
is what FemCity is, and this is who we are about. So yes, we can come together in togetherness and be accidental friends if you're open to it, if you want to. And if you're really not open to it, then this isn't the place for you. Like I felt like you have drawn some very clear lines in the sand, which is I love that. I love that because it makes me feel safe in this networking organization. And it's like, I know where Violet stands. I know where this organization stands.
Right.
And I know that y'all have my back, in a way that people who truly stay out of things, I think it comes across too wishy-washy and then it can get really toxic. So I just wanted to share that because I feel like, no, you've actually drawn some very clear lines.
Thank you for sharing that. I have chills all over, Candace. That means so much to me because when we're truly saying it's a safe space for women, it should really be a safe space for women.
And all women.
All women. You should feel, all women, you should feel like the love here is so strong. Doesn't matter anything else. So, and I have to say, since we did that, all those things that happened in 2020, our diversity has increased.
Great.
Because I think that whether it's the energy or they come across something, the diversity has increased. And so when we do our virtual networking, it makes me smile so much when I look at the pictures and I see a beautiful array of colors and age, you know, where you have someone who's in their mid 70s and you have someone who's in their early, I mean, it brings so much joy to me. So I think making those, and I didn't think they were tough decisions. It was kind of like humanity, but getting the hate email, you finally, you know, after a while you're like, oh my God. And then you lose more members and you're like, oh my gosh, you know, like this was, I didn't realize how bad, I didn't realize how many were in our community that felt uncomfortable about talking about race, talking about how to help heal, talking about inequalities and just listening. Key components of being a good human, you know? So it's actually helped us, I think, because if the intention is to become more diverse, what we did through those steps allowed more women to feel that we're here for them. So thank you for sharing that. That just made my year.
Right. No, it's so true. Yeah. And it's the right people showing up. I mean, we don't want, you had said something earlier, and one of my things I think about is I'm not for everybody, and that's okay now. But it took me a while to get comfortable with that.
Right.
Being for everyone is being for no one. So we have to stand for something. And I love where we are as an organization, and I really do love what 2020 has brought out in this group. What was I going to say too? And I think what you've also done is you have provided opportunity in the various chapters across the country for the women who maybe have grown up and it's all looked one certain way, or everyone has been one single race or ethnicity, whatnot. And now it's like you've got that choice. And when you get to a certain place in life, it's like, I'm going to stay in this lane over here because it's the only place I'm comfortable, or wow, I'd love to meet some other people. You know, and personally, I feel super gifted. I look around my close group of people in my life and I'm like, it is so colorful. And, you know, my life is so much better because of that. So I don't think it needs to stay in the same lane, you know. I don't want to be around people that look like me and act like me. And, you know, I got enough of me. There's plenty here for one person. I need it to look a little different outside of my own little universe. So, yeah.
But not everybody. What I realized, the inspiration from that conversation on racism was inspired by one of our members who was truly just ignorant. Truly ignorant. She was saying things in one of our sessions, and I know just based on ignorance. And so when I heard that, I started thinking, I bet you she doesn't have anyone in her life that's different from her. I wonder, you know, I suspect that she's probably never met someone other than herself. So going back to like, that's what inspired that conversation, because I was like, I'm so blessed because my whole world is completely diverse, intentionally so. You know, Steve and I, when we first started dating, he and I both had the same values and morals and the way that we wanted our world to look like for our kids also. You know, having gay couples at our house all the time, being, you know, part of their ceremonies. When we lived in North Carolina, their commitment ceremonies. I mean, our house was filled of, you know, friends that were Persian and from India. And, but not everybody has that.
Right.
And it's not that it's a luxury, but it's a blessing, you know? So I realized that, and that's where I'm like, you know what, they can't have that conversation. They can't call a friend of theirs, it's a Black woman, and say, what are you feeling like right now? Tell me about your experience, your life. Tell me. And just listening. They don't have that. And so let's do it for them. Let's have those conversations. And I'll ask the questions that you or the other people, you know, that they don't know how to formulate. They say, how does it feel? Tell me. So that's what inspired it. Someone who was ignorant inspired it. So I was like, oh my gosh. And it was like from Sunday to Monday. It was like, boom, Monday morning. I think Candace was the first one I messaged. It was either Candace or Arnetta. And I was like, I got to do this. We've got to, you know, like we have to have this conversation because people just don't know. They just don't have the people in their life, and they don't feel comfortable with saying, I don't understand. Why are people rioting? I don't understand. What's going on? What happened? You know what I mean? Like they just don't. So look at that, like something that was shocking for me to hear. I was like, oh, I couldn't believe she was saying things. And then the next day, like creating something where it was like super informative. And Candace, thank you so much. Because that was literally like within like 2 hours we created it. So thank you.
That was a great week conversation. Everybody that you had on and interviewed was phenomenal.
All
Right.
friends.
But you didn't just stop there, because the thing I liked about FemCity is you do have people of color who have been teaching, who have been sharing information as part of the networking group. And I feel like it's one of the few networking groups where it's actually very easy. If you really, it's on your heart to share something, you can do that through FEMS and reach people. And it's good stuff. Like there's a whole library of things. And when we talk about diversity, for me, it's not even just skin color and like everything that comes along with that, but it's also diversity of how to do business, by the way. So I wasn't raised with grit. I was raised and told repeatedly that I was ungrateful, I'm not good enough, I'm never going to amount to anything. And so it's very helpful for me to be to be around a person like you, or to be taught by a person like you, or other classes, so I can get, oh, we're raised in our lanes one way. Like, it's like attracts like, where I found myself just kind of surrounded by people who were very content with status quo type things, you know? And then I'm feeling like I'm not okay with this, but I don't see anything different. I don't understand. And that's where a networking group like FEMS is very helpful, because it's like, oh, here are people who are actually brave enough and pursuing their dreams, who are following their calling that they have. And it's not weird. It's not something that we just think about, but, you know, you just get married and have a bunch of kids instead to fulfill something. You know what I mean? Like there's a diversity and mindset and perspective that is huge, that I also value and appreciate.
Right.
And I love, that's the power of women sharing stories though, because when we share our true story, right? Like you and I just connected in similarities of our upbringing. Terry and I connected. So it automatically connects because, wow, that person's like me, because we have the same kind of like, you know, these little snippets of experience, and she made it. I mean, I can make it too. So that's where the power of storytelling and sharing, like, you know, I've hit rock bottom. I've lived on food stamps. I've lived in welfare situations. You know, I had an abusive, I mean, when you go through that, it then expands the world of other people, because they're like, oh my gosh, that's what was holding me back. Right. Because my parents told me I couldn't, because my mom was a drug addict, didn't love me. And so that was holding me back. But my God, you did it. Oh my, that means I can do it too. It's like the allegory of the cave. You don't know until you get out. And that's the beautiful, you know, you hear this movie, The Great American Lie. One of the points that really tugged at my heart was that some of these inner city schools, they don't have, since they're so not diverse, they're not meeting other families, they don't know what's possible. And so there's a little snippet there that talks about that, is that these kids in this specific school, they're not surrounded, or they don't know anyone who's gone to college, or they don't know anyone who lives in a house with central air. They don't know like that. So their limit is here, because they don't know what's possible. And so that's also the downside of when you segregate certain groups, that you can't uplift, you can't pull them up through those stories, through showing them, here's another way of living life. Here's what's possible. So that's what I love when women share stories, honest stories, you know, not like, oh my God, I woke up like this.
Right. Well, thank you so much for meeting with us, Violet. I think the last question I want to ask you is, where do you see like business, leadership, entrepreneurship going in 2021? Since you're connected to so many entrepreneurs and business owners doing so many things, where do you see things headed? Do you see like a trend, or what do you think 2021 is going to be about for business owners?
I think it's going to be more community-based. I think it's going to be more heartfelt. I think those are the ones. I think community connectivity is important. I think that a lot of even restaurant owners, people are starting to realize that someone else's path may not be mine. You know, kind of like the luxury, the things that people were like trying to create because they saw it on Instagram. I think that's kind of gone out the window. I think people are going to live in their truth also. I think 2020 was shedding a lot of stuff that no longer served us. And that's ugly and painful.
Right.
But I think 2021 is kind of rebuilding with purpose and intent, and in service of others in all aspects of I think those are the ones that are going to thrive. The ones that are like really passionate about moving forward, you know, not doing that job that they hated, not being in that relationship that was holding them back, like all those things. I think 2021 is going to be really about just healing together.
All right. I love that. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for talking with us today. How can people find you if they're interested in learning more about FEMS or just like getting your book? And we'll have links. We'll post links to stuff as well. But what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Thank you. This is so lovely, by the way. Loved it, love it, love it. You can go to FemCity.com, and we do have a free 30-day trial membership. So I would actually sign up for that and take all of our classes. You can take all of our classes. Really, we have a great lineup in January, amazing classes. We even have one on how to channel, because we had that the other day. One of our members was like, how do you channel? What's that? So we're like, let's do it. So we have that.
Love it.
We have Candace is on our panel for what the F just happened. So we're going to close out 2020 also energetically. And so it's a combination of mindset, wealth, and spirituality for January, so we can all get proper guidance to get us through a great year.
I love it.
Love it.
And we're looking forward to your group coaching for the globals. Yeah.
Oh, yes, today.
Is that today? Oh, no, that is today. I've got it in my calendar.
At 2 o'clock.
Right, noon my time. Right, I've got you in the calendar too. So, perfect. I've got an 11:30 call. I'm hoping I get done with that. Thank you so much for everything. We love you.
I love you guys too. Thank you.
Oh,
Bye.
Bye.